Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. This is part 2 in our treasure ecosystem series. It's a 2-part series, and this is part 2, where we speak to Ben, who is the founder of BattleFly, which is a GameFi game, auto battler, PvP, we'll get into it all, game that is being built on the treasure ecosystem. Magic is the token throughout. They're building on this decentralized Nintendo as Treasure describes. So I wanted to take a look back at this project, Treasure, broadly. It was a really big deal in my mind when it came out in January of this year, when the Bridge World white paper came out. And this concept is still really compelling of a decentralized Nintendo. So I wanted to talk both to the Treasure DAO team, which we did in part 1. So if you haven't checked out that episode, maybe go check that out. And now I am talking to Ben, who has decided to build on Treasure and to understand a little bit more about why he's made that decision and what he's up to. I hope you enjoy.
When it comes to NFTs, convenience often wins over security, despite scams being everywhere. Brands and artists have no other choice by complying with big marketplace terms and weak security because no good alternative exists. Which is what prompted Ledger to fix the problems of NFTs themselves and launch Ledger Market. The Ledger Market provides an end-to-end secure NFT experience for brands, artists, and users, enabling true ownership and control over NFT assets, from minting to storing. Ledger Market secures NFT projects via Ledger Enterprise, keeping you protected from phishing attacks and scams. And the market directs users to Ledger Live, where they can transact with a contract directly, giving clear signing details instead of blind signing and praying. Don't trust, verify with clear signing from Ledger Market. Stay up to date on the latest drops and marketplace updates by following Ledger on Twitter and joining the Ledger Open Discord, which is linked in the show notes below. BUENO is the NFT toolkit you need to launch your digital collectible on the blockchain without coding. Every step of the NFT creation process, from generation to mint, all taken care of by the BUENO NFT toolkit. With BUENO, you can load up your art layers, reorder the layers, tinker with rarity, everything you need to make your NFT project a reality. BUENO even allows you to mint your tokens on the blockchain with zero code and offers advanced minting logic like linking allow lists, airdropping tokens, and on-chain royalty configuration. As a part of their launchpad, you'll get access to forums to run surveys, email collection, and build your pre-sale list to make sure you are hooked into your own community. BUENO is full of powerful tools you need to build the most expressive NFT project possible. So go to bueno.art and start building your own collections today.
Ben, founder of BattleFly. Ben, thank you so much. Welcome to Overpriced JPEGs.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I just spoke with the Treasure DAO team, and we got a sense of what they're trying to build and this platform layer, almost protocol layer ecosystem upon which other projects and games and metaverses can build. Why don't you just start by giving a quick explanation of what BattleFly is? We'll get more in depth about it down the line,
Yep.
But just start with explaining what it is and then why were you drawn to the Treasure DAO ecosystem and decided to build there?
Yeah, so BattleFly is a PvP strategy auto battler. That's a mouthful, but essentially what you do is you build your BattleFly, which is composed of mods. So you've got a BattleFly, it's got wings, and it's got up to 4 weapons slots, utilities, shields, etc. And there's almost infinite builds that you can build of your BattleFly, and every BattleFly has slightly different attributes, and every mod interacts with the BattleFly differently. And then you send it into battle. And the idea is that it's a PvP game, so you're competing with one magic against an opponent, and you can set your BattleFly to battle 10 times a day or 100 times a day, and it just goes and does its thing. Kind of like imagine a really aggressive Tamagotchi that wants to fight other Tamagotchis, and then you come back at the end of the day.
Sort of set it and forget it, though hopefully you're not forgetting it.
Exactly. Like you might check in after every battle, or you might be really confident. But ultimately, your objective is to build a BattleFly that can win more than it loses. And it doesn't have to win every battle that it does. It just simply has to have a positive ROI. And if you do achieve that, then obviously you get a much greater share of the yield that the project is generating, through the magic token, and you also obviously get magic from beating your opponents up. So that's the game. It's kind of like a fun little auto battler.
I have so many questions about that, and I always caveat, usually off screen, but I'm going to give the caveat here on screen with you, on the record with you, which is that like I'm a bit of a gaming noob. I'm trying to learn it, so like I will inevitably ask fairly naive questions when it comes to gaming. But there's so much about this that I really want to probe into in terms of like, what the opportunity is here. Why an auto battler? What's the point of a game if you're not, battling yourself, so to speak? Before we get into all of that. Was this a concept before TreasureDAO and you brought it to TreasureDAO? Is this where you already in TreasureDAO and knew you wanted to build something within the ecosystem? How did that partnership and relationship begin?
It was the latter. I've spent, a fair bit of time before getting into Web3 building PvP fantasy sports games. And I've done a lot of work in that space and always marveled at how you could get millions of people to every week pick a fantasy team out of real players, argue about it, blog posts, forums, and then the game happens and everyone determines who wins and loses. And there's money involved, of course, but there's something bigger than money. It's rivalry. And I think people genuinely enjoy kind of building things and then putting them to a test against opponents. And I was early in TreasureDAO, a really big believer in the way the team sort of spoke about proof of imagination and the way that you could start to connect games together around this interoperable layer. I had some reservations. This is during the bull market around the sustainability of P2E as it was evolving. Then it felt like players were hooking into the meta really quickly, which was basically farm as much as you can and dump as quickly as you can before everyone else kind of does the same thing. And I was chatting with the team back and forth, more like at a spreadsheet level about could you design a model that would be a more sustainable game? And I realized that yes, you could. And Magic was the perfect sort of token to base that on because you'd have all these other games, you'd have all these other use cases, you'd have all these other projects, so you could start to build you would have all these other hooks to hook into to advance the story beyond just what a single team could do. But perhaps most importantly, that it was a really strong forum for a PvP game where players could be exchanging tokens and winning, losing, without having the volatility necessarily of the only use case for the token being, I've just won it and now I want to sell it to go and do something else. So I see very much the BattleFly role within the TreasureDAO ecosystem is to help onboard users in because we're such a low cost game to enter. And hopefully players win some Magic or they get Magic out of the game. And then their next step is to go and play Tales of Illyria or Beacon that's coming out soon. Like they use us as a point to go and explore this universe. And the other thing I loved is that games, we're working together. So we've got a project at the moment and some of the mods, like there'll be a weapon in BattleFly that you can only get by holding an NFT from another game. And I think that sort of thing is really, really interesting because you start to build tribes and community and rivalry that goes just beyond me playing a single person.
And it's where the vision of the metaverse starts to really play out. Like in some ways we've, had little mini metaverses for years. You could argue that any sort of these games that have existed are a metaverse in some form. But the interoperability piece, the how are we building a broader ecosystem in which you're going from one worlds or, one sort of gameplay style to the next is, I think, clearly this next evolution of it. So orient us in the timeline. We had, small brains or, the small sort of launched in, I think, November of last year or sometime kind of late last year. You then have the Bridge World white paper comes out in January or February. Where is BattleFly and where are you as all of this is happening?
So BattleFly existed as a spreadsheet idea back in December of last year. And
it's around Smalls time.
Yeah, around Smalls time. And I was saying to the team, I think I want to build something. They were like, do it. And at that stage, Treasure didn't have a lot of infrastructure. It was still being built and things were launching every week. So we had a couple of false starts as we were trying to figure out what's the right way to go about it. But by about March, April of this year, we sort of had the team assembled. We knew exactly what we were building. The part that took a lot longer than I think we thought it would was the combat engine. Building a combat system that is I guess, robust enough to handle potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of battles every day. That's interesting, that's fair, and that's provably fair, and can be done on chain. Took a lot more work, and I think initially we thought we'd have 30 different weapons, and I was like, that's a lot. Like 30 feels like a lot. And Jean, who's our creative director and sort of took charge of designing the game system, said, no, we need hundreds. And and so away we went. So it's been a real ride. I think, but it makes sense. Like as we've grown, we've attracted people in who've got deeper gaming experience or arcade gaming experience or mobile, and every member of the that sort of team and has contributed some sort of insight to help the game come to life.
What is your funding? Where's your funding coming from? And then maybe I'll couple that with the question that I know you made a sizable investment that helped Treasure DAO as a whole, buying up a lot of Magic that put money into their ecosystem, into their treasury. So talk about the kind of funding dynamics there.
Yeah, we did something really novel. I think it was novel. It was novel for me, at least. We released founder NFTs to initially V1s. There was 220 and about 2,100 V2s that came a bit later on. And those founders essentially put Magic into our founders' vaults. And what we did is we took the ETH and we went and did a big OTC buy with Treasure, and we put all the Magic that we got into initially the Atlas mine, which is part of the Bridge World economy, and now the harvesters. And we've used the emissions that have come off that Magic every week. Half of those emissions go back to the founders who hold the NFTs, and the other half have helped get the game up and running and start to build the network out. So it's been largely entirely funded to this point by emissions, which is a kind of a novel and also slightly terrifying way to build when things start to tank. And then obviously Treasure recently has taken an investment back into BattleFly as part of our token release. So it's flowed both ways, which is really nice. And
missions are essentially like the staking rewards within the Treasure DAO ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. So BattleFly was able to, through the founder NFTs, we generate a lot of Magic emissions every week. It's in the vicinity of 50,000, I think, Magic that flow into the project, and so we've been able to sort of bootstrap the network through that. So
that's amazing. And it sounds like you have, so you just said you've taken a little bit of funding that was put back into the BattleFly ecosystem from Treasure DAO itself. I know they did a little bit of a topper raise in September, they mentioned. So I imagine some of it came from that. But these rewards, these emissions, right, are in Magic. But I assume you have people building that are like, hey, I need money to pay rent and like eat. So is most of those emissions being off ramped into a fiat that you can use to pay people? Is it half? Like, that's amazing to me that you're sustaining this off of the native currency. We've had a little bit of USDC, like a little bit of stables that we've managed to make last a long time, because it turns out that AWS doesn't take Magic for paying for service. Not yet, but wait a couple of years. I mean, Google Cloud is now taking ETH, so I don't think we're going to be too far off,
Yeah, so we've got a small sort of core team that's building. They've been being paid in Magic, where there's
wow.
And then some of those team members have built a sizable position in Magic, but of course there's been some sold along the way as well.
Sure,
that's part of it.
This is tangential maybe to the main point here, but I'm curious. As we're recording this, we're a week out from the FTX collapse, and so there are a lot of people giving a lot of scrutiny to like FTT, to these kind of made up money tokens that exist. Is that something? Do you have friends or family members that are like, what's this, we're not hearing such great things about like tokens that are kind of concocted by people in, out of thin air seemingly. And like, make sure you're still grabbing cash. Like, have you felt any blowback from that at all?
Definitely we met with a bunch of VCs prior to, sort of in the period between the the bull market ending and the bear market really taking hold. And the common feedback we heard was this idea of using someone else's token seems weird. You should, in game, like, why are you using Magic? Why don't you just separate and go and launch your own token and have your own standalone game? And I kept saying that I just don't think GameFi needs another token in game. Like, yes, we're launching a governance token because that's how we want to run the network, and we need people to be able to vote. But we're not using it in game. It's Magic is what we're using. So I heard that a lot and continue to hear that. Like, it's from one perspective. I think something that BattleFly has done from day one, because we just didn't know anything different, is have all of the treasury, all of the, we're running Flywheel, which is a staking as a service, and we've got, I think, roughly 16 or 17 million Magic in there that players have staked, earning emissions on top of our NFTs. And all of that is transparent and on chain. Like, anyone can go in and just see it there. I would never imagine like us leveraging that and, going and borrowing and doing things like that. So I think, hopefully what comes out of the FTX saga is that level of transparency on chain becomes normal, not something that was accidentally done.
I won't ever pretend that GameFi is at all my expertise in this broader industry. I think it actually combines two of the things that, of everything going on in this industry, I kind of know least, which is gaming. I do a lot with Immutable X, and so I do have a sense of what's being built. I'm getting better and stronger on gaming, but it's I didn't grow up a gamer, so that just I start behind behind the others. And DeFi, so neither of those are areas where I would claim to be an expert. I will say is very clear that it is not going to be sustainable to have just like infinity tokens or not even like supply of any one given token, but that you have, to your point, a token for every game. I think the reason that, Yuga and ApeCoin is interesting because they are obviously the dominant project, and it felt like there is an opportunity there that ApeCoin could become a dominant coin among sort of other NFT projects that launch their little metaverses or, launch their own worlds. But certainly not all of them can do it. So I think it feels very right to me to be like, we are going to be a part of this like rising tide lifts all boats model, in which we are tying our ship to many other games that will all use this same token. So if one of us is faltering for a month, the other is creating that utility for the Magic token. That means we don't end up in this death spiral where because one thing starts going wrong, everybody starts selling off, which means the rewards aren't there, which means there's no longer reason to be playing the game. Yeah.
And I think that any system that distributes yield needs to have winners and losers, and that's I can't think of another way around it. Like you need to have, and it can be fun. It doesn't need to be like, oh, you lost and therefore you're a loser. But it's, if I think about the people who have won and consistently lost in a lot of DeFi projects, it's the people who are early tend to win, and the people who were late tend to lose. And there's not many ways around that because of the way the tokenomics are designed. And I became
that's also the case in Ponzi schemes, right? Which is sort of why you end up, with these accusations that are not entirely incorrect at times.
Yeah, anything that relies on any tokenomics or model that fundamentally relies on a new batch of players coming in and making the same mistakes again in order to give exit liquidity to the people who were there before them is not sustainable. And so that's why we landed on PvP. Now, no one's like, each battle costs 25 cents. Like, it's not like people are playing with enormous amounts of money and no one needs to battle if they don't want to. People can just collect and improve and do those things, improve their BattleFly. But I really like that idea of okay, you've lost. If you lose in BattleFly, you get nectar. And I've got two BattleFlies running at the moment. One's incredible and one's terrible. And my terrible one is earning all this nectar. And you can only use nectar in BattleFly. And it's not even an ERC. It's just an off-chain balance that we hold. But you use nectar to go and help get better mods. And that loop is really satisfying. It's like, I've lost, but I've learned a lot. I'm going to go and level up. And now I'm doing better.
Yeah, it's like if you have the worst record in the NFL, you get the first draft pick.
It's exactly that model. You can learn a lot from sports.
Yeah. Is there an analog, again, a newbie question, is there what would be the closest analog, to BattleFly in Web 2 as a catch-all term for not Web 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, some people who've played it have sort of said this is a bit like reminiscent broadly in a nostalgic way of Pokemon Stadium battles, where you would sort of build your Pokemon or build your little your team and then send them into battle, and it was very much like a stadium based game, and you didn't do a lot in it. Like once you configured your Pokemon ready to battle, it just went and battled, and you watched it. And so that's probably an analog. I mean, Tamagotchi is actually kind of the phenomenon that I've always been fascinated by, because our target audience isn't necessarily the JPEG hunter who's going to spend $2,000 dollars on a quick flip. It's somebody who they might be in an emerging economy. They like BattleFly because they can get in for sort of $5 to $10. They don't have to play it all the time, but they can use the strategy, and they can use collaboration with other players and other knowledge sharing to build a better one. And that's our target market. It's not the NFT hunters of the world.
I think I was told by a Nigerian American that Nigerians actually, at least at one point, were like the primary, players or founders, or I know not players because the game wasn't out yet, but like the biggest contingency of your community. Is that right?
They were definitely up there. They were a really, it was a really exciting time around the mint, because we initially thought we were just going to have randomly generated artwork. And then a couple of projects said, oh, can we put our artwork on the BattleFly wings? And then we got connected with Tasha, who is a Nigerian, I would say, like reality TV influencer, who said, I want my own BattleFly. And so we did that, and everyone went crazy for it. And suddenly the Tasha BattleFly, of which there was only meant to be 50, became this in-demand thing. And we had, thousands of people from Nigeria in our Discord, and they're still around. I mean, I think a lot of them sort of got the free mint, and most people, regardless of where they were from,
they flipped.
Got the free mint and flipped. But it was like it's been funny to watch them start to flow back as they've realized, like, we're still building, and the game's coming to life.
Was that, you mentioned kind of emerging economies, and again, I know, Nigeria is a great example of, an African country that's really on the blockchain thing. You obviously have examples of, like, in the Philippines with Axie Infinity. How much of that was like the initial goal? Like, were you looking at Axie Infinity, seeing what was happening, in places like the Philippines with that, and saying, okay, this isn't sustainable, but let's go for something similar that is sustainable? Was that sort of the intent? Yeah,
I mean, I've got so much respect for like pioneers like Axie that just break through, and even if they don't quite get it right, and there's they may still you learn a lot. And so Axie was definitely an inspiration in terms of how they mobilized what felt like an entire emerging economy, and created community around it, and created sort of something that was bigger than the gameplay itself. So much discussion. I don't know why more game builders, a lot of game builders at the moment, I think, have gone into their shell a bit and said, our job is to build the Fortnite equivalent for Web3, because that's going to get gamers into Web3. I've spoken to a lot of gamers, like a lot of them hate, like they hate crypto. They're really anti it. Like I've been in really interesting and fascinating in-person and online discussions where I'm like, I could never change your mind, even if I built your favorite game here. But what's, in Indonesia, you've got incredible Web3 wallet adoption, the same in Philippines, the same in Nigeria. And I think a lot of DeFi products and NFT projects have inadvertently shut them out, or shut out people who might not have hundreds to spend, but still love the idea of having a little Tamagotchi that's going and trying to collect yield on their behalf. And the first game that unlocks that and does it sustainably, I think we'll have a really good time, because there are not tens of thousands or millions of people, there's billions of people in that circumstance.
This is definitely the thing that I've really learned talking to Immutable X, and Justin Hulog, who's the head of their game studio there, has really helped to kind of open my eyes about some of this stuff around like each new wave, each new paradigm with gaming, like mobile, seems to unlock and shift the centers of power in like the global game economy. And if you're, kind of in the West, if you're in the United States, you have this kind of very maybe Western centric view of what gaming is or what games are. But that's doesn't not at all necessarily map to the global games world. And again, mobile being massive in parts of Asia and again, kind of centers of gaming shifting around because of those changes. And it seems like the smart people I talk to, and it seems like this is where your head is, seem to think that blockchain gaming will be no different. And going to where there's this blue ocean, this wide open space of ready to be activated gamers who are maybe going to be drawn to a different style of, not necessarily style of gameplay, but some different fundamentals than what has existed previously.
And a big part of gaming, I think we focus on a. It's easy to focus on a small subgroup who are the people with the headsets and the gaming chairs that you see in esports. For a lot of people, Scrabble Online is one of the world's most successful gaming apps, and there's it's people winning, losing, going up leaderboards. They're not getting anything for it. They're getting some tokens that they might be able to, get an ad-free upgrade or something. It's not a lot of the games are based around, as I said, rivalry and building community and tribes, and I think that's where we've started. And if you make some yield along the way, that's kind of cool, right? It gives you something to go, okay, now I'm going to maybe play this more. But hopefully people just dig building a BattleFly and seeing it fly and seeing it battle, and that's enough.
Get a little specific with us here. I think the core of the sustainability, and I'll preface this question with this, and then you can tell me if this is right? Like the core problem with Axie Infinity, which many probably know, is it was like an almost entirely extractive model, where it was like you could win, but there weren't resources sort of flowing into the game. And so unless you had new players joining, right? And so that got you on this trajectory where you constantly had to be adding new players. And when you tapped out of that, the whole system started to kind of fall apart. Obviously they've got Axie Origin. They're working to change that and creating upgrades to the game, et cetera. In your model, so take us through specifically how BattleFly is different and how you make sure it is sustainable.
Yeah, so BattleFly is designed to work whether there's 20 people playing it or 20 million. I hope for the latter, but at the moment it's 20, because we're just in beta testing and there's only 20 of us playing. And it's fun already, right? Because you've already got people who are winning and people who are losing, and the rivalry and the banter starts, right? So where we're different is we have adopted a model, and I kind of hate using this analogy because it makes it feel more like gambling, but online poker, which had this incredible wave and also some bad actors, but in this incredible run where it was PvP gaming essentially, and they saw churn rates of about 25%, which means in any given quarter, about one quarter of the users said, I'm not doing this anymore, and they'd go and do something else. But the next bottom quarter, like that bottom 50 to 75%, would kind of level up, and then it was far more sustainable than thousands of, like, constantly churning the audience. So BattleFly is aiming for something like that, where there will be people who are really, really bad at BattleFly. And the reason they're bad will be because they ape in, they don't understand the game at all, they don't do any of the research, they don't engage with the community, they just literally send a dud into battle and it loses 10 times, and they might go, screw this is dumb.
Gets a lot of nectar.
They get a lot of nectar, but there will be those people. We're almost counting on them because it feels like crypto is rich. Like if there's one thing that crypto has a lot of at the moment, it's impatient people willing to ape in, not do the research, lose and be like, it's the game's fault, and move on to the next thing. We think that's probably a well that we can tap for a while. But for most people, the game becomes hopefully more about trying to preserve the ROI. And while there will be whales, there will be players who have 100%, or not 100%, but 80% win rate because they built a BattleFly, they've bought a bunch of mods, they've gamed it, they've invested so much that they need to win a lot to make it back. The beauty of BattleFly really is that all you're trying to do is get a BattleFly to win 52% of the time. If you can do that, you are consistently making yield without having to overinvest. And I reckon that's a really fun, like, I think there's people all over the world that I've spoken to are like, that sounds fun. Like trying to get that balance right between not overinvesting, not underinvesting in terms of like building a BattleFly and just having this thing running at a slightly positive win rate.
And so fundamentally, you're paying into a system to play at a very low cost rate, and that's what's if there is that, I don't want to say zero sum, but in any given battle, it's zero sum, right? Somebody's going to win and somebody else is going to lose, and that keeps the ecosystem from just running out of its own funding, essentially.
And seasons help us constrain that. So by running this for a season, we do have these natural points where we can, a bit like Fortnite, just clear a lot of the any issues away that might start to manifest in game loops and say season 2 is now starting. And BattleFlies are, there's some carryover effects because we want people to have the rewards, but it's not this infinite sort of infinite loop that we have to support. There comes a point where we go, okay, we're zeroing the effectiveness of mods out and you're starting again. And I think that will help us constrain that loop.
And to put like kind of a fine point on the economics here, I think I read, maybe your team had sent me something around like $5 a day, like earning $5 a day is sort of almost like this benchmark of like, that's where you want to get things, or did I misread or misinterpret?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's everyone's mileage will vary and in the game, but there is a plausible scenario where if you have a BattleFly and you're battling sort of 50 times a day and you're consistently sort of winning around that 55 to 60% rate, slightly more than that 52%, but you're sort of taking, even with Magic at suppressed prices, something in the vicinity of $3.50 to $5 a day in yield that you're making. And your choice then is to do one or two things. You can farm it and dump it, right? But I think the more ambitious players will say, I'm going to now increase my battle rate. So I'm going to use the yield that I've got to go and battle more to see if I can hold this rate. And if you do that, if you keep compounding your earnings in and you start to build a fleet of BattleFlies and they're all battling more and more, and you end up in this really interesting point where you've actually got like these Tamagotchis that are yielding a lot. And I think that's kind of cool.
So yielding a lot, what does that look like? What does that mean practically? What would a lot of yield be? If
you take one BattleFly, and this is an extreme example and is absolutely not financial advice, but if you take one BattleFly and you equip it reasonably well, so with some mods, and then you send it into battle and it battles 10 times a day, and you compound its yield. So every time you win Magic, you say, I'm going to increase its battle rate. So at first it's battling 10 times a day, and then at the end of one day, you've made one Magic and profit, and you say, I'm going to put that into another battle. So tomorrow I'll battle 11 times, and then 12, and so on. You end up with the compounding effect where by the end of the year, that BattleFly is using the same math, making 13,000 BattleFly per day. Sorry, 13,000 Magic per day, which is ridiculous. Like it's battling almost constantly at that point in time, and it's just winning 53% of its battles. So that to me is sort of the game, right? It's like, how do you compound? Do you just farm and dump? Players who farm and dump will, they'll get their $3 to $4 to $5 per day if they're successful, but they won't be keeping up with where the game's going. So they'll start to,
fall behind.
You start to fall behind. You start to win 48% of the time, which still feels pretty good because it's almost the same, but the math is now against you. And it's
just like ultimate nerddom. It's like, how do we take the nerdiest things possible and just smash them together? Like gaming, battle gaming with just like math.
Ultimate. It is. And as I said, the first version of the game was on a spreadsheet, and it was fun. Like it was kind of like, I wish we'd released that because people would have enjoyed that.
I joked about this before you hopped on, which is just like, what is in the water in Australia? You're Australian. That's your origin. And, again, I work with Immutable X quite closely. You've got Robbie and James Ferguson, who are both Australian. I interviewed the Kieran from Illuvium recently. Of course, he and his brother are brothers. I think he's got many that are building auto battler games and a whole world with Illuvium that are in Australia. Does it feel that way to you too, or is that like just my perspective that like Australia seems to be producing a disproportionate number of particularly like crypto gaming folks, but like kind of crypto folks in general?
Yeah, I think Australia has had an incredible history of sports. Like entertainment is a big part of the Australian landscape, and I think with the emergence of GameFi, it's dragged a new type of builder in. Some of those people that you mentioned haven't necessarily built games before, or built games in the style that they're building now, but they've been drawn to the potential to scale a global business out of hopefully entertaining and building something that people like to play. So I don't know whether I don't think it's a uniquely Australian thing, but I do think maybe a better way to answer that is I think Australia has often punched ahead of its weight in terms of things like an Australian invented Wi-Fi, like that came out of Australia, and the internet was invented by an Australian. We kind of, I think there's maybe an underappreciated desire to innovate and to innovate in a practical way, not just a flamboyant way. So I think, BattleFly is innovative in that we're attempting to bring a few things together in an interesting way. I was like watching the Illuvium demo the other night, and it looks insane. Like it looks wild.
Good, right? I watched that too.
I just thought that it looks so much fun, and it's completely different to what we're doing. And I love that.
Yes.
It's kind of, there's all these different options, and Mutable's going from strength to strength as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love seeing the kind of diversity of what's being built. I like that you're targeting this. I think you were calling it like high frequency, low cost, and so I think we'll capture, probably a broad audience of folks, but definitely a different audience than folks who are like trying to go for some sort of Call of Duty style, like really high fidelity graphics, game that feels really intense. And it's clearly a very different model, which is cool. Let me ask on that front. Are you already starting to see? Do you anticipate sort of this guild model, or like what we saw with Axie Infinity, where you have almost like these like farms, where you have like the kind of owners of battle, and it's an auto battler, so it's a little bit different. I don't know how you kind of already have your farms are like your BattleFlies, probably not individuals doing the work, but how do you see that playing out or not?
Yeah, it was the one part of Axie that I really didn't love, was when the speculators and the players became two different parts of the economy, and we had a bunch of people in our Discord when we were doing the whitelist for the mint, and ended up chatting with them, and I met people whose job it is, or was then, probably not anymore, to farm whitelist spots for NFT projects for wealthy Western investors who were just like hiring 5 people to go and farm, grind whitelist. And so they became my kind of research group for BattleFly. So I really want them to own their own BattleFlies and to run their own army of BattleFlies, and not be doing it on behalf of somebody else who's got the capital to front for it. So we probably won't have a big scholarship model.
That's right. That's what it was. The Axie scholarship.
Yeah.
Was that what it was? Oh, well, I guess no. I guess it wasn't. It didn't come from Axie. So now I'm thinking this in real time. This is why you prepped this beforehand. You had like your YGGs, like you had sort of these other like third party systems that built the scholarship models, and it wasn't endemic to Axie. Am I getting that right? Okay.
It wasn't, but it became part of, like, I think inflation in the Axie economy got to a point where if you were from sort of certain parts of the world, if you weren't, the only way you could play the game was by essentially renting one from a
because it was just so expensive. I think when I was talking to your team, one of the things that came up is like maybe the price point. Maybe this is no longer true, but the price point was still even a little higher than you want it to be ultimately, because there are lots of parts of the world where, 25 cents, 50 cents, $1, is considerable. Is there like is part of the goal to get the price of entry down even further? Or do you feel like you've already sort of achieved that? And since I was kind of catching up with your team.
I mean, bear markets have the hideous consequence of depressing all the prices. So what was originally sort of, I remember when Magic was $5 US, at its all-time high, roughly thereabouts.
It's now 40 cents around there?
Like 30, 40 cents. It jumps around a bit, but we had to rethink a whole bunch of things based on that. And then it went back down again. So it was work that we didn't need to do. Ultimately, we want to have different arenas where people can come in and there'll be a free play arena where people can essentially go and play to test out the game. There'll be some lower cost ones, and there'll be some even more expensive ones where people can get into. We need the volume of players to be able to justify forking it that way.
And I'm putting together the problem, right? Exactly. When Magic is $5, now suddenly it's a $5 entry point, which is sort of out of range of a number of folks. And then if Magic's down to where it is, it's maybe a little bit more accessible, but that's something you'll have to navigate, it sounds like. And probably part of the season benefit is you can kind of maybe tweak things or figure things out as you
exactly. Every 12 weeks we get a light reset and away we go again.
COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Masari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless. We're all bullish on NFTs, but gaining exposure to NFTs as a whole is difficult. How are you supposed to gain broad, generic exposure to an industry that's designed to be unique and non-fungible? CRYPTEX has the answer. CRYPTEX Finance produces synthetic tokens that lets you get exposure to areas of crypto that you otherwise couldn't. Their first product, TCAP, provides broad exposure to the total crypto market cap of all crypto assets. And their second product, JPEGZ, gives you the ability to get exposure to the entire NFT market. It's the first real NFT index token, so you don't have to go hunting for rares or finding under the radar opportunities. You just need to own some JPEGs, because JPEGZ tracks all NFT collections with real-time exposure. This is a first-of-a-kind product from CRYPTEX, who has worked in close collaboration with Chainlink for months to ensure accurate price feeds for true exposure. Live minting and trading of JPEGs will open at the end of Q4, so make sure you stay up to date with CRYPTEX Finance by joining their Discord, Telegram, or following them on Twitter. To
throw out a couple stats that maybe to talk through or get your reaction to, your mint orchestrated the largest onboarding of wallets to a layer 2. I say that I want you to fact check me on that it was to any layer 2, and how do you know at the time, but when you kind of launched your founder pass?
Yeah, I mean, it was so our BattleFly mint, we minted 30,000 BattleFlies, which was a big number at the time. And even though it was a free mint, because that was then very much part of the Treasure DAO ethos, we were concerned about, are we going to have 30,000 of these actually minted out? Because people have to pay gas and things like that. But then the whitelist contest just got away from us. And I think we could have done a 60,000 BattleFly mint. There was so much demand. We brought down Arbitrum 2 or 3 times during our mints. Like it was insane, and we saw thousands of people piling into not just BattleFly but Treasure DAO and then Arbitrum as a result of that over the course of about 2 weeks. I think Arbitrum Odyssey has probably since then taken the mantle of most significant onboarding, because that event seemed to bring hundreds of thousands where we were in the tens of thousands. But yeah, we did our part, and Arbitrum as a layer is, I think, in a really strong spot. I don't know by which fortune we ended up there, really. It's from a Treasure DAO perspective, but it's it's certainly a very, very fascinating and intelligent team.
I was going to ask you that how Arbitrum, because I asked the TreasurDAO team, but I don't feel like I got even like the clearest of answers, I suppose.
So Treasure was originally running on L1, and I remember some of the gas fees that the people were paying were just insane, and I think they did some. There was a need to make a decision quickly because the gas fees alone were sort of curbing the usage and how much people could play. And I remember one of the Treasure team saying Arbitrum looks really solid, and then coming back sort of a week later and saying it's actually I'm a believer. And I think that migrating to L2 is a bit of a mission, but I'm glad they did it. And yeah, here we are.
Okay, last question, though I always say that, and then I reserve the right to have a follow-up if one arises. And of course, this is a leading question. I know, of course, what the answer is going to be. Not financial advice. Is magic a big buy right now, in your opinion?
I couldn't. I mean, I don't know. I've got a lot of magic. I think this is a really tough period for a lot of people who put their faith in some people who turned out to not be what they thought or said they were going to be. The thing that I have loved about the Treasure team is that, almost across the board, they doxed from day one, not because they necessarily thought it was a big deal, but because they were genuinely building and
well, you say that, but I'm pretty sure I had one undoxed person.
Oh, did you?
And like a semi-undoxed person in the interview. I just said, I think Santi's not doxed.
You don't have to dig too hard to connect the dots on
to
those.
Figure out who they are.
Yeah,
okay.
docs are semi.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But over and above that, I think they're building with integrity, and they're building with a 3 to 5 to 10 year roadmap, and that gives me a lot of confidence there. That if they were going to do I think they're building for the right reasons. I think they're attracting games in that are really diverse. They've got a different proposition, and to some of the other gaming chains that are maybe more about infrastructure and less about sort of community and fun. And I think, I can contemplate a scenario in the next, when the sun next shines again on crypto, that there might be 3 or 4 GameFi ecosystems left standing. And one of them might be Immutable because they're doing some really interesting things. One of them might be Polygon, and one of them could very well be TreasurDAO because they've gone and built this really fun little tribe of 50 or 60 games that somehow all tie together and people just want to go and hang out. I always joke that Treasure might accidentally invent the metaverse that Zuckerberg spent $10 billion trying to do, just by virtue of bringing people together in a fun way.
It's interesting that you compare TreasurDAO to IMX and Polygon, where I would say I would compare Arbitrum in some ways to IMX and Polygon, and TreasurDAO to, like, I guess maybe Illuvium wouldn't be entirely the right system, since Illuvium is kind of building out their own, maybe slightly more closed ecosystem than TreasurDAO is. But do you disagree? What makes you say TreasurDAO sort of compare them to the layer 2s themselves?
Yeah, because I think for most users, they won't know or care. That whoever has the best onboarding will probably, that'll help win. But I see TreasurDAO becoming a destination for people to go and hang out in. And the Discord has remained vibrant despite the fact that a lot of people have round tripped. It's they're still bringing builders in, and builders are still shipping interesting things. So regardless of whether it's an Arbitrum or not, I think it is a destination for people to come and play games, hang out, spend time together, and compete. And competing is the most fun.
Ben, thank you so much. I really appreciate you hopping on here. It's been really fun for me to kind of understand TreasurDAO better. I told their team, like, I remember when the Bridge World white paper came out, and for some reason it really stands out in my mind. I'm probably over indexing on it compared to maybe what other people's experience was, but I just remember, like, it was like it's all I saw. I felt like on my feed at the time, and maybe it stands out to me too because I tried to read the whole thing and understand. I was like, I just can't. Like, it was so long, and it was but I think that is the reason I was like, yeah, let's circle back with this project. Is I always thought that the comms by the team was was thorough, comprehensive, and kind of professional in a way that we definitely sometimes lack in the crypto world. You know, professional is not always the term that one would use to describe the behavior. So, you know, really glad to see it's a group of people that continue to build and seemingly thrive and have folks like yourself deeply a part of. So thank you for coming on and sharing a bit more.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.